The Game of Thrones series is a parable in which the Apollonists are showing you what the world is really about. Now, I'm not going into the content of the series, nor about the seeds, nor about any of the episodes. You can check it out for yourself if you're a Game of Thrones fan. What this series shows you is that politics is a game. Yes, you heard me correctly. Politics is a game. A game that the masses think is real. And it's because the masses think it's real, they invest in this game. Because the game has consequences for them, they think that the game is real. The game is just a game. It's their participation into the game that's real. And their participation leads to consequences. So then they perceive those consequences as evidence that the game is real. It's not real. It's a game. It's a hoax to keep you trapped in a state of anxiety. And who benefits from that state of anxiety? Demons do. I'm not going into the Pharaoh bloodlines of the Illuminati and all of that. You can check out those things for yourself, even though I recommend you to be careful because you have disinformation agents out there that are also sent to keep you trapped. And it comes down to the following. You have people that throughout generations, their families worshipped the beast. They worshipped Apollo. And they want to retain their ease, their financial ease. The way they do it is to trap the rest of the population in an anxious state, because when human beings are in an anxious state, they can't think clearly. They can't relate properly to those around them. So by keeping the rest dysfunctional, they can manipulate this dysfunction in their advantage. And of course, they need backup, and demons provide the backup. In exchange, they make sure the population remains anxious. Let me give an example of this. Let's say, I'm just making up a scenario now. Let's say you have a country called France. And in France, the people are fed up with the high food prices. They really are. Why are the food prices high? Because the castle lords who manage all the huge farms out the country, they make sure the food prices are high, but because due to the high food prices, people need to work, need to be employed, and they're the ones owning the currency supply. So by doing this, the population is trapped in a cycle of working, just to survive. However, when the people realize, don't a minute, France is a very big country. Let's say this scenario happened in the Middle Ages. People say to go from Paris to Lyon takes about 3 days. To go from the border with Spain to the border with Holland takes about a week. To go from the west all the way to Switzerland takes about 8 days. Our country is quite big. How could it be that the food price is so high? Let's say this happens. Now, the blue blood households, or the royals, and also the aristocracy will also participate in this game. They realize, oh there, the people are waking up. So what will they do? They will contact their colleagues in Britain, and they will tell them the people here in France are waking up, that this may disrupt things. And then those in Britain tell them, don't worry about it. Then those in Britain contact the wizards, and they come with a plan. And they'll instruct the King of England to, that is the wizards, they will instruct the King of England to dump much agricultural surplus into France. And in exchange, you will get more ships. So, within the same year, many ships are produced in Spain and shipped off to England, while much of the surplus is dumped in France by using those same ships. What happens now, due to the surplus of food that comes in, the population in France is blinded from seeing that they were trapped. They don't see through the deception anymore because there's cheap food now, so they're happy. Then people realize, hold on a minute, food price is so cheap, let me move to the towns. So now many more people move to the towns. Urbanization comes up. So look at this. Before, when the food prices were high, people had to go to the town to work. But they went back to their farms. Well, farms are their small villages. Now, many abandon their villages and go to the towns, which then turn into cities, leaving the agriculture behind. So now there's an agricultural decline throughout France, which will benefit the same aristocracy and blue bloods. Okay? So now, due to the surplus that came from England, and the population not aware that the agricultural surplus comes from England, that people were tricked by thinking things were going well with them, the economic bubble traps them into urbanization, which made them more dependent on the castle lords. So now that they're all, let's say most of the people live in cities, who's doing the work on the farms? Now you have cheap labor from other countries that come to do the work. But then the aristocracy spread the news that there are invaders coming to steal the bounty of France, and the people who are still in this economic boom will volunteer themselves to fight against those that are threatening them. But there's no invasion, it's just cheap foreign labor, because people are needed on the farms, but the farms are abandoned. And the surplus from England is not infinite, so sooner or later the bubble's going to end, and once the bubble ends, people are going to wake up again. So now that most of the population is stuck in towns, you keep them stuck there by thinking it's dangerous to be on the field. And that's how you use a Game of Thrones to trap them. In England you have a throne, in France you have a throne, you have several thrones in the German states, and they're all working together to keep the French people trapped in a state of anxiety. At the same time, they also keep the English people trapped, the Spanish people trapped. That's how it goes all over the world. It's one worldwide game led by a Greek cult that worships Apollo. That is what the world is. And the Game of Thrones is a series, you can watch it, you can enjoy it, but the message the pink rulers give you is that politics is a game. But most people don't want to see this, because that means they need to revise their thinking. They need to examine their attitudes, and they need to face themselves. They don't want that. So they rather comply with the game, even if the game is rigged against them. Now don't get me wrong, if you have local councils where people can vote, that's real. Okay? For example, let's say you have a family, and the family decides what they're going to eat for Christmas, and people vote turkey. Now that's real, okay? So votings happen on a local scale. But when it comes to the large scale, you better be sure that there's a rigged situation going on. I'm not saying that people don't vote. The votes are real, but I don't think that the votes will determine the eventual outcome. Often the outcome has already been decided. And the votes are just allowed to happen to give legitimacy to the game, because the people need to believe in the game for the game to continue. So they allow people to vote. People feel as if they're participating and doing their duty. And when the outcome comes, they say, hey, we voted together, so there's legitimacy to what's going on. Even though the outcome was determined maybe years ahead. It can be, for example, that the pagan rulers want to import many people from, let's say, Syria into Europe. And let's say now that suddenly a civil war broke out and many Syrians flee to Europe. Now, those people from Syria are here. It's not about the people from Syria, they just want to have more foreigners in Europe. Now, you have groups that will fight against this, ultra-right-wing movements, and then you have leftist movements that oppose this. Some become violent, some not. So now there is division within Europe. The outcome is that those foreigners are integrated. But because the people are so focused on the drama between those that are against the mass migration and those that don't care about it, they don't see that they are not multiplying enough, they're not having enough babies. So within 10 or 20 years, there will be a lack of young folks from the native population, and now you need those foreign people. And now, the people 20 years later will likely vote in ways that will benefit the welfare of their society. They will be tired of all the issue around migrants and all of that. They just want things to work out, and they realize we need foreign workers, so let's go for it. In this case, the people vote thinking it's their own free will, their own personal will that shows something, while they have been directed to do it. But it happened over a period of maybe 1 or 2 decades. So the voting happens, the voting is real, but it has been predetermined. It's a game, folks. Now the game has consequences. So you will face this game whether you want or not, because your daily life is affected by this game. Let's be real about it. It's not a soccer game that people play on a field and you can just walk out of it or walk away from it. It's not as if people are playing chess and think, no, I'm not interested in chess, and you walk away. No, it's a game that affects your daily life, and it's even a game that becomes fatal to a lot of folks. So what do? You learn to use the game in your advantage. You learn to overrule the game in a Christ-centered way. You're not going to fight the game because that will deliver, because when you fight the game, you become focused on the game, and then you are feeding the game with your aversive attachment. No, acknowledge the game is there, be alert what's going on in the game, notice the patterns because the game can only function in a pattern, then learn to not be trapped by those patterns, learn to overrule the game. That is how you do it. Well, that's it for this video. Enjoy watching Game of Thrones if you're watching it. Be at peace, and you can only be at peace when you agree with Christ.